What is magic? Hi there, I'm Carolyn Elliott, the author of the best-selling book, Existential Kink, Unmask Your Shadow and Embrace Your Power, which is also a book on shadow integration magic. So, magic has many definitions. One of the most popular definitions is that offered by Aleister Crowley, probably the most notorious and influential magician of the 20th century. Crowley said that magic was the art and science of causing change in accordance with will. So if that sounds like a broad definition, then you are correct, because under that definition, everything counts as a magical act. Me lifting this wonderful can of bubbly water is a magical act. And that was part of Crowley's point, is there's no scientific explanation for how consciousness interacts with matter. It's all freaking magical. So there's that little bit, but if you're wondering if you want a definition for magic, more because you want to practice magic and you're just getting started, that rather esoteric, trickstery definition might not be the best for you. The one that I teach my students is that magic is active participation in synchronicity. So, what is a synchronicity? A synchronicity is a pattern of events that share a resonance of meaning. Furthermore, it's a pattern of internal and external events that have a shared resonance of meaning. So, oftentimes people passively observe synchronicities, like, you have a dream about a friend, and then the next day that friend calls you, and it's like, whoa, those events have a shared resonance of meaning, and you're like, that's a synchronicity, that's amazing. And likewise, Carl Jung, who coined the term synchronicity, coined it in relationship with dreams and waking events. So in magic, what we're doing is we are understanding that the fact that there can be a shared resonance of meaning between internal and external events points to the notion that perhaps the internal and the external aren't as separate as they sometimes appear. Perhaps consciousness is a continuum that's just like riding along through apparent space-time. And when we make internal changes, we can see external results. Likewise, well, how do I say? This is supported by modern physics. The notion that the universe is fractal and holographic was talked about a lot by the quantum physicist David Bohm. And the fact that the universe is fractal and holographic means that you can change something at a small scale, say something in your personal environment or something within you, and then see those changes reflected outward in your environment. Because if you change a small element of the pattern, you change the whole pattern, because it's all fractally, holographically interconnected. So when we are doing magic, what we are doing is we are creating a density of meaning. And this is done in various ways all around the world with ritual gestures, dances, materials, stones, plants, animal parts, poetry, dance, music. All sorts of things go into magic. But what they're doing is they're creating a density of meaning and basically kicking off a series of synchronicities that will then rhyme with that density of meaning that has been created. So an example of this would be if I wanted to do Venus magic, sort of in the tradition of Hermeticism, and I wanted love. Let's say I want a new lover. I would choose Venus. I would choose to work with the planet Venus because Venus is the planet of love and beauty and attraction. And I would choose to work on Venus's day, which is a Friday. Usually, if I was getting really particular about it, I would choose to work in the hour of Venus, which is a specific astrological thing. I mean, you could get very into fine details with astrological magic. But anyways, I'd be working on a Friday, Venus's day, and I would be creating a talisman. It could be as simple as a little sort of mojo charm bag out of materials that have a resonance with Venusian energy. So that would be copper, that would be the colors green and pink. Those would be scents like roses. All floral scents have a Venusian resonance. I would be creating a petition describing to the universe, hey, this is what I want in a lover. I would use all of Venus's sigils and, like the sigil of the planetary intelligence of Venus, the sigil of archangels connected with Venus. Put that all together. Put that in a little charm bag. Invoke Venus with the Orphic hymn to Venus Aphrodite. Give her an offering of Venusian foods like chocolate and strawberries and champagne. That would sort of, and in doing that, what I would be doing would be creating a density of meaning that evokes this archetype of love and attraction and pleasure and beauty. And then, since the universe is a fractal holograph, what happens is I would begin to experience more Venusian synchronicities in my life. And one of the things that I love about magic is that it does not require faith. It does not require anything more than a belief that is big enough to make you willing to experiment. So you do not have to take my word for this. You can go out and create any density of meaning that you like. And I gave you the example of planetary magic, and planets are easy to start working with because they have a lot of traditional correspondences that you can find in places like the book 777 by Aleister Crowley, or I also like Christopher Warnock's book, Planetary Magic. But of course there's a wide range of magical traditions and styles available, but you can start making sense of all of it just by thinking of it through this lens of, in any magical act, you are creating a density of meaning. So, and you're creating a density of meaning, which then, and the way that I like to say it is, the universe is a poet, and the universe cannot resist rhyming with itself. So whenever you create a density of meaning, you will experience things connected to that density. It's pretty much inevitable. You just have to have your eyes open to notice them. And I would add a further point, which goes in line with Aleister Crowley's definition of magic as the art and science of causing change in conformity with will, which means basically everything is a magical act. I would say that everything is operating via synchronicity, via a pattern of events with a felt resonance of a shared and subjectively perceived resonance of meaning. Everything is operating like that all of the time. So I don't know if Carl Jung himself was so bold to assert it that way, because I know he was always trying to maintain scientific respectability, but I do think that his disciple, Marie-Louise von Franz, gets into asserting that in her books Psyche and Matter, and it's Number Divination and Number. I might be remembering those titles wrong. But there's certainly examples of cultures that have viewed everything as synchronously happening. So for example, I believe Marie-Louise von Franz points to the Taoist kind of Chinese way of looking at things as there's patterns of events that occur together, and that's how the I Ching can be used for divination. Like if you draw a specific set of hexagrams for a divination, that is telling you, okay, this is a moment in time where these kind of things tend to happen. These hexagrams tend to be drawn, and the emperor tends to die, and there's famine in the land, or maybe there's bountiful harvest or whatever, but it's like a set of things that the time is made up of qualities more than quantities. So in the Western world, we have very much emphasized the linear mind and a sense of causality that's very much like one thing causes another. But that's really not actually how the world works, especially when modern physics are taken into account. Causality, as it's conventionally thought of in the West, could actually be called folk causality. And this is a wonderful point that a very astute author named Eric, my screen's getting weird, that Eric Wargo makes in his book Time Loops, which is this fascinating discussion of synchronicity that's all about how, retro-causation is a thing. So events that happen in the future actually create ripples that go backwards in time and affect the present. And I know that sounds weird, and believe me, it is. And there's also scientific studies that have provided examples of retro-causation. So you should definitely check out Eric Wargo's book if you want to learn more about the weirdness of time and how causation, as we usually think of it in the Western world, is actually folk causality. It's actually a handy explanation of how things are caused. Why am I talking about causality so much? Because Carl Jung defined synchronicity as an acausal principle. So Carl Jung was recognizing, like, just because you have a dream and then something happens the next day that resembles your dream, it doesn't mean your dream caused the thing. In fact, according to Eric Wargo's argument, it may be that the thing happening sent ripples backward in time that affected your dreaming. Anyways, when you get into magic, as much as I have over the years, all of this strange stuff that I'm talking about starts to make more sense. And maybe it makes sense to you already as you're listening to this because you're interested. And if you're interested, that means that you have a magical mind already. You're tuned in to the wider possibilities of our existence. So I've taught magic a lot to thousands of people. And a specific focus of the magic that I teach has to do with the integration of the unconscious, making it conscious. So taking shadowy, unconscious material and bringing it to the forefront of the mind and putting the ego in at least a conscious relationship to it, so that it's not like we just have these like vast parts of ourselves that we're completely unaware of and completely out of touch with, that sort of like pop up in sideways manners and run our lives. And why is that important? Why has that been such a big focus for me? Well, really because, I gave you the example of creating a Venus talisman as a density of meaning. If you think about it, we humans are densities of meaning. We are walking, talking, thinking, feeling densities of meaning. So I subjectively perceived densities of meaning. So how to give you more of a sense of this? We all have deep beliefs about ourselves, beliefs that are so deep we don't even perceive them as beliefs. We perceive them as just, that's the truth, that's the way that things are. Whatever we have operating at that level of belief, i.e. our truths about ourselves, that determines the field of meaning that the universe rhymes with or synchronously responds to. Now, obviously, this can be really frustrating because we might consciously say to ourselves, well, I'm a good person, I believe in good things happening, and then we might receive really negative events in our lives, and it might not make a whole lot of sense to us. And that would be because the meaning-making levels that are actually operative, that are actually like the weighty truths in our being that have a lot more magnetism to them than the flittering little conceptions of the conscious mind, those are operating at an unconscious level. So unconscious beliefs about ourselves, about the world, that we probably inherited from some sort of childhood wounding. Pretty much every human being I've ever met has experienced some sort of deep wounds growing up. There's very few people I've met who have zero self-worth issues at all. So for those of us who have experienced that wounding, it's a bit of a, you've sort of got the fuzzy end of the lollipop, because that means that you need to do a lot of work to undo that conditioning, to undo and make conscious negative beliefs about yourself, so that the walking, talking talisman that you are can be far more receptive to beautiful, positive synchronicities. So actually, a ton of magical work ends up being less about, crystals and herbs, and I like to call that like the arts and crafts side of it. I mean, there's definitely the arts and crafts side of it that's wonderful, but a ton of magic, if you actually want to produce deep, lasting change in your life, ends up looking fairly similar to psychology. In fact, I would say psychology done right is magic, and I think Carl Jung understood that very well. Unfortunately, there's not a huge, vast understanding of that in the current mainstream world of clinical psychology and therapy and stuff, though there's always some really wonderful magical therapists out there. But right, magic is not the ruling principle of the science of psychology as most people understand it. Although I would say it has a huge amount to do with how we grow magically. And in fact, the language of Jungian psychology I find to be just a very useful and accessible language to get people who have modern Western secular materialist educations to begin to understand how this stuff works. So when I talk about making something in the unconscious conscious, somebody in another tradition of magic might talk about that as, developing a relationship with a certain spirit. So like the spirit model of magic, or the animistic model, is a completely valid model of magic and a bit different in language from the Jungian one, but I would argue that ultimately they are relating to and talking about the same phenomenon, just with a different style of address. Let's see, what else is there to say about magic? You might be curious about why magic is spelled with a K. So magic with a K was Aleister Crowley's specific innovation. Previously, magic was just, and still is, often spelled just, M-A-G-I-C in English. Crowley added the K. Why did he add the K? Well, one reason is that K in the English language alphabet is the 11th letter. And Crowley was very in touch with numerology, with gematria, which is connected to the Kabbalah, which is a whole big thing in the history of Western esoteric magic. And in those considerations, 11 is the number of magic. Why is 11 the number of magic? Because the whole ultimate purpose of magic isn't just to create like nifty, fun results like getting a new lover or more money, although those things are fabulous. I'm certainly very into those. But the ultimate purpose of magic is to unite the individual human person with the vast divine self that we are, what Carl Jung called the self with a capital S, what Aleister Crowley and the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn called the Holy Guardian Angel. And the self with capital S, or the Holy Guardian Angel, one way that you could think about that is it is the whole universe existing in fractal holographic relationship to your ego self. So, ultimately our ego selves are like little soap bubbles just just frothing in the ocean of consciousness, and are highly illusory and will absolutely dissolve at some point when we die, if not sooner. Some people dissolve their egos all the time in meditation or psychedelic ceremonies. Right. But as long as we're perceiving the self or the Holy Guardian Angel as an entity that we are in relationship with, it's basically God. Like, it's God. It's your own personal relationship with God is denoted by this term. Yeah, as long as we are identified with the ego and experience ourselves as separate, we will experience this as like a vast, numinous other being that we are in relationship with. So the goal of magic is first to attain what's known as knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel. So knowledge and conversation just means that, you're aware of this larger self and you are in touch with it and you receive communications from it in your nighttime dreams, in synchronicities that you observe, stuff like that. But then the ultimate goal, the piece de resistance, is something called crossing the abyss, and that basically entails completely dissolving your personal autonomous sense of self into, the ocean of non-duality and becoming fully one with your holy guardian angel, with the self with capital S, i.e. with God. So that's a complex thing to talk about, but I just want to give you an idea today that magic is something that you can begin to practically get involved with today just by creating densities of meaning and then noticing how the universe rhymes and responds with those densities of meaning. You can also begin experiencing magic by taking what I call full responsibility for the hermeneutic choice. So what's hermeneutics? The word hermeneutics comes from the name of the Greek god Hermes, and your hermeneutic choice is basically the biggest tool in your magical toolbox. That is that humans have the power to decide what things mean, to consciously decide what things mean. As I talked about earlier, most of us have inherited concepts and inherited ideas about what we mean, what the world means, what stuff in general means. And we have all these inherited meanings coming to us all the time from our family, our friends, our school, social media, corporate media. It all just it comes on in. Well, when you become a magician, the primary thing that you're doing is saying to yourself, maybe I don't just want to passively receive all of these meanings that are being handed to me, because these meanings have a huge impact on my life. They create the synchronicities that tend to happen around me. Thus, they create the opportunities, the relationships, everything that's available to me. Maybe I should find a way of really taking conscious, deliberate control over the meanings that I allow to be assigned to me and my experience, in order that I might have a better set of synchronicities, a more beautiful field of meaning might dance around me. So that's related to the kind of psychological work of magic that I was talking about, the making the unconscious conscious. All of that is hermeneutic work that has to do with taking full responsibility for your hermeneutic power. And most people never ever do that. And if you look around, you probably notice that most people have lives that kind of suck. So if you don't want to be trapped in a sucky life, if you don't want to be, perpetually suffering from anxiety and depression, as millions upon millions of people are in modern society, not to mention manifold other ills, then really, seriously, take control, take responsibility for your hermeneutic power and the meaning that you assign to yourself. So one powerful way to do this is with a tool that I've developed called Existential Kink. You can read my book about it. It's available everywhere that books are sold. I'm told the Audible version is particularly fun. And also I teach courses on magic. I have a membership called Electric Yes, where people get full access to all of my courses, and they also get live coaching on their magic, and then get access to amazing, intimate, live, fun, social events that we have with magicians all around the world. So there's about 400 members currently in Electric Yes. It's a lot of fun. I will leave the links to my website where you can find out about Electric Yes in the little below section here. I hope that you go ahead and like this video if you have indeed liked it. Please also go ahead and subscribe if you would like to hear more about the topics that I'm explaining. And thank you so much for tuning in today. Bye-bye.